Greetings from the cosmic horror. The stars are right once again. The great old ones allow us to talk about for 30 plus minutes H.P. Lovecraft, the horror writer who is a genre unto himself. I am your cosmic host, Mark Griffin, executive of the Lovecraft estate on Yaga, joined in by Richard Wilson, who is attempting to pry open the crypt of Cthulhu. And Richard, you may know this, but this is our second anniversary episode here.
Yes, it is.
And guess who I got popping out of the cake for us?
Princess Cthulhu.
Not Princess. We got Robert Price.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
All
he's
right.
popping out of the cake
That was
for
my
us.
second guess.
Yeah. And Robert Price, he was the editor of the Crypt of Cthulhu and is a Lovecraftian scholar. And I've heard Crypt of Cthulhu described as a fanzine, a journal, a pulp thriller, and a theological journal. What do you call it?
Let's see. Well, it's sort of all of those things because I was inspired directly by S.T. Joshi's Lovecraft studies, but I kind of liked Stan Lee's jocular approach to editing and the comics. And so I decided to combine both and to have a more frivolous attitude when outside of the scholarly articles, because I wanted to have serious discussion of the Lovecraft and related material, but it's a fun thing, and I hate pomposity, so I came up with this strange formula.
And you did it for quite a while. When you started back in was it? Wait, no, excuse me, I'm jumping. You started back in 1981. Is that right?
That's right. Actually, it still has not quite stopped. I have another issue in the works now. We were just knocked way off any kind of schedule by Mark Michaud's ill health. It was his idea to start it up again after some years. And we had a lot of fun putting out several issues, but then he really got knocked for a loop with Parkinson's. And so he's just not been able to follow up. And I tried to arrange for a couple of other publishers that didn't work out. And finally, I've got another issue. I think, what is it? 114, I think it is. That's coming out pretty soon.
And now you did this as a contribution to the Amateur Press Association, the Esoteric Order of the Dagon. I guess for people today, can you explain exactly how the amateur press worked? You know, we have internet and everything. Some people may not understand exactly what is an amateur press and how does that work?
This was an all-consuming hobby of Lovecraft himself and a bunch of others that I don't know if you'd call them nerds. There wasn't that much to be a nerd about, but people that I guess poured a lot of their energy into preparing these privately circulated magazines. And the idea was you weren't trying to make money on it. You weren't seeking wider publication. You just had a list of members, each of whom got a copy of your magazine. And sometimes they were really very well published. You would have thought they were published, at least from a few I've seen. Others more modest, but nicely printed and so on. And so Lovecraft was very involved in this because the guy was, as you know, a fanatical writer. Even beyond the fiction, he wrote thousands of pages of letters and so on. Each one of them, sometimes 100 pages long. And some say he might have had a kind of epilepsy, one of the symptoms of which was hypergraphy or fanatical writing. But he loved this and became, I guess, the chief executive officer of both the United Amateur Press Association and I forget what the other, the National Amateur Press Association. They would have conventions and correspond and so forth. And he had one called a journal called The Conservative, and can't quite think of the other one. But this was revived in the late, I guess, 1970s during the boom of interest in Lovecraft. And so they had there were two amateur press associations, the Necronomicon APA and the Esoteric Order of Dagon, run by different people, but with a lot of the membership in common. The idea was that if you were a member, you had to offer at least, I think, 4 typed pages of material, ostensibly on Lovecraft, 4 times a year. And you had the what do they call him? The official editor, I guess, would send everything to him or her, and they would make copies and send them out to all the members. Sometimes it was pretty putrid nonsense with reviews about rock groups and stuff that had nothing to do with Lovecraft. Others really had contributions to Lovecraft scholarship, and this, I guess, was right on the eve of Lovecraft studies coming out. Well, I submitted an article to Lovecraft Studies in the fall of '81 and made contact with S.T. Joshi, and he invited me to come up to, I was in New Jersey at the time, he invited me to come up to Providence for one of the 2 or 3 times a year meetings of the Providence Pals, as they were called. And we would meet and take a walking tour of various places Lovecraft either lived or mentioned in his stories, and talk about publishing and writing projects. And great people. I really was lucky to have met them. And they invited me to join, so I did, and I really got hooked on it. And so from the outset, I didn't want to bother with from 4 pages. I put out a saddle-stitched, a stapled fanzine called Crypt of Cthulhu, and there was the humor element. There was an EC Comics reference in it, and later I joined the other one as well. And so this meant I was doing 8 issues a year and of Crypt, and it became kind of a precursor to Lovecraft message boards, which didn't exist at the time, but soon would. And I sent copies to big name writers in the field: Robert Bloch, Ramsey Campbell, Brian Lumley, Lynn Carter, and eventually got to know these guys. And you would have letters from them commenting on the issues and going back and forth with other readers who now had their chance to fraternize with the bigwigs. And it was just enormously fun for many years. And we miss an issue, I think, until probably the 100th issue, 8 of them a year, and expanded to do all kinds of other things, largely like collections of Robert E. Howard's unpublished drafts and the like, and other things with horror fiction and so forth. But once I began to teach full time and got married, though I continued for a good while, I eventually just had to drop it for lack of time. But then I started it years later with Mark Michaud, and then again that went on hiatus. But this new issue is coming out. It may wind up being the last one, depending on what there is people will submit. So I don't know, but at least there's one more coming out.
One more. You picked some interesting season dates for your issues and all that. You had Candlemas, Eastertide, Rude Mass. Why did you pick them? Just for your
they're the ecclesiastical names for the quarterly and cross-quarterly holidays that are also embraced and celebrated by Wiccans and old pagan religions in the British Isles under different names, like Hallowmass or Halloween was Samhain, or as spelled as Samhain, and all of them were like that. And I liked and in Lovecraft himself, he would do that. Like Wilbur Whately was born on May Eve, so it was he calls it Rude Mass, and he says, what Rude Mass horror had, that means like the feast of the Rude, the cross, what Rude Mass horror had unleashed upon the world. And he mentions Lammas, which is, I think, August 3rd, and Midsummer is John the Baptist nativity, and so forth. I always loved that idea that there was a superficial Christian coloring to try to keep what was really going on secret.
Speaking of that, one of the people who wrote to you was Dr. John Warwick Montgomery. I was a little surprised, that he wrote to Crypt of Cthulhu. How did you send him a copy?
Yes, I did. And in the very first issue, I didn't really know what I was doing, so I had a little section of reviews of horror novels and the like that I had enjoyed, Lovecraftian or not. And I always got a kick out of a short story he wrote called God's Devil. And Montgomery was a very theologically conservative Lutheran and an apologist, a defender of the faith and of the accuracy of the Gospels. He pretty much thought you could prove Jesus rose from the dead, etc. Well, I began reading him when I was kind of a teenage apologist and still in, I guess, early in college. By the time I contacted him, I wasn't anymore, but I always enjoyed his polemical style and sort of sharp sense of humor and his wide academic reading. And so I looked at him much like C.S. Lewis. Longer agreed with him, but I always had gotten a kick out of him, and I thought he might like to know that he was reviewed, and he did write back and was very cordial. Since dedicated a book to him, and he's quite a rascal and a fascinating guy. He's very arch conservative theologically, but he's anything but a boring stiff. Personally, and so I was privileged to have any contact with him.
And you got St. Joseph to contribute. I mean, he was doing the Lovecraft Annual, so did he was it like competition for him, write for like 2 amateur journals?
Not really. He obviously has so much to say about Lovecraft and knows so much about him. It's effortless for him to write some revealing, interesting thing that nobody has said before about his political opinions or his letter writing or his poetry or one thing or another. So we became really good friends, and he was always happy to write stuff for, I'm sure Lovecraft studies couldn't accommodate all he would write. So I guess he was happy to have another outlet.
Now, when it came, I think I heard where for the contributors, sometimes just came up with a little of a germ of an idea for them to write about. Sometimes they made a title, and then you left the rest for them to write.
Oh, yeah. This was especially in Shudder stories and risque stories, which were like a kind of tongue-in-cheek salute to the old weird menace pulps like horror stories, terror tales, dime mystery, and so on, and spicy mystery and so on, which was pretty much the same kind of thing with just a very light, suggestive sexual element. But I got people who had actually written stuff like this in the heyday, like Hugh Cave. This guy wrote over 1,000 published pulp stories in different venues. And I would send a title to him, like, how about oh, geez, I forget what some of them were. Eventually, I later in the whole thing, I sent him a title that we collaborated on called something about the elder blasphemies, and he wrote a draft, and I added to it, and so on. But usually back then, I would just say, "Okay, how about this?" And for a friend of mine, Charles Hoffman, who's a big Robert E. Howard scholar. I said, okay, Chuck, how about writing me a story for Shudder Stories called Plaything for the Chortling Fiend? And he wrote this hilarious, but straight-faced pastiche of the kind of stuff they published. And a lot of it was like that. Oh yeah, one that Hugh did was Brides of the Blood Fiend from Hell. I mean, it was the same kind of crazy stuff they had in these Weird Menace and other pulps. So that was always a great exercise in creativity and satire.
Now, did the contributors get paid, for doing the work in here, or they just do it for vanity?
Well, eventually, in some of the all fiction magazines or occasional all fiction issues of Crypt, I would pay the fantastic sum of like $35 and a few copies. There's no way I could actually pay anybody what they were worth, and they did it because they got a kick out of it also. And so it was have a little bit more of a, like doing these magazines led directly to my doing anthologies for Chaosium and Fedogan and Bremer. And there, I did have more of a budget to work with, and it was still scandalous, but authors were happy to work with me. Throughout Crypt, I would not use just fan fiction, though I wrote it myself and nothing against it. My rule was you had to have actually published in the original Weird Tales to appear in Crypt of Cthulhu. And amazingly, I was able to fill several issues. Now, some of that stuff was unpublished material by Robert E. Howard or Robert Bloch, and I got in touch with other people. Like we did one called Astro Adventures, 7 or 8 issues of that, and I found that there were old pulp writers like Hugh Cave, Carl Jacobi, various other ones that still had a bunch of stories in the trunk, and they didn't mind giving them to me to publish for a small fee. They knew I was a Time magazine of the Saturday Evening Post. So I just had the greatest time doing this, and luckily people liked them.
How'd you get funding, to pay these people and do the prints and everything?
Well, a lot of it was published really on the sly by a friend of mine that worked at the college print shop, and they were just Xeroxed basically and put together by machine. But when I paid for fiction, that was just out of my pocket. It was no huge sum. But it was a shoestring budget, and I warned people about that up front, and they seemed to just enjoy the game, so there wasn't really a problem.
You had such a variety of subjects to talk about in there. You had like Solar Ponds meets Cthulhu, did Lovecraft read Middlemarch, Brian Lumley Reanimator, you reprinted DeCastro's original tales, and so you even had trivia questions. And I did have one trivia question I was a little bit curious about, because I never heard this before, that Buck Henry adapted Shout Over Innsmouth as a skit on Saturday Night Live.
Yeah, I saw that once when I was visiting a friend in Florida. I happen to remember it. And I mentioned that only because some people think I hallucinated the whole thing, but no, Buck Henry was the guest, and he went to some island filled with fishermen by trade, and he's he's checked into some hotel, and he's asking questions because he's interested in, just like the guy in the story, Olmsted. He's doing genealogical research and so on, and he's asking for any kind of information. Well, Dan Aykroyd comes in wearing a flannel jacket and a cap, and he's a New England fisherman. And while he's talking to Buck Henry, his throat begins to expand and contract like he's a bullfrog. book, and Buck Henry's oblivious of this. It just doesn't occur to him he's seeing anything odd. I don't. It wasn't a long thing. It was just one of the short skits, and it was pretty hilarious, and it was obviously based on The Shadow over Innsmouth. But the thing is never included in the online archive of Saturday Night Live. I mean, they cut a bunch of stuff to make room for the lame music acts, and that one's, as far as I know, still not available. But I remember it vividly. They didn't mention Lovecraft, but they didn't have to. It was obvious.
I was curious because I did try to find that one, but I never popped up.
Yeah, same with me, but I know I saw it. I remember it in the visually even.
Yeah, you had like some really humorous stories in there too. It was like volume out of print, which basically kind of like, Lovecraft is first introduced to the Necronomicon, and Houdini's in the closet, and I love the part where Lovecraft, first hears the word Necronomicon. He asks, "Well, how do you spell that?"
Yeah, boy.
And I tried to look up that author, Jim Cart, but every time I did, I kept getting Jim Carrey in the Google searches, and so I don't know much about him.
What was the name, Jim?
Volume Out of Print was the name of the story, but it was by Jim Cart. And
I think there was a pseudonym. I can't remember the name of my then friend who wrote it. He wrote a couple of stories. Huh.
Yeah, there was another favorite of mine, just because it just seemed so out of the blue. The Cthulhu's, where you kind of like mix, Cthulhu with the honeymooners.
Yeah, that was great. Yeah, that's I can't remember names now. It's been so long, but the author is a film director and has done some kind of Lovecraftian work.
Yeah.
No doubt I'll remember it as soon as
John Strycey.
Strycey. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I have your
right
here. So
the horror of it all.
Yeah, and all that, and I also liked Lovecraft's letter to Santa Claus. Reading a lot of his letters, it seems like such a funny way to make fun of some of his letter writing.
Do you remember Lovecraft as I Seem to Remember Him by F. Gumby Calum? Oh, I love doing that one. That was
that was a funny one too. It seemed like everybody was like, had some memory of Lovecraft, and those were like really funny. That one there. Yeah, those are quite good. I was curious about one contributor, Donna Death. Apparently she was an actress, and she was in some things I never even heard of, like Geek, Maggot, Bingo, Freak from the Suckweasel Mountain, They Eat Scum. Who was she exactly? How'd you meet her?
She was a goth. I don't know what her actual last name was, but she was the archetypal goth. And she was a sweet kid. And she worked at a sex toy company. And she was in these movies. I was invited to the premiere of Geek, Maggot, Bingo. And she had faked her own death, and at least sent the rumors around that she had died. And she was going to unveil herself still alive at this, but the secret leaked out. But it was, as you would guess, a grade Z, bottom of the bucket thing. It was just really a joke more than anything else. But it was a lot of fun. Premiered at the Danceteria Club in New York. I think it was at midnight. I remember driving into the city real late, and for a while I was the only one there. But then the audience collected.
And so she wrote in a Vice column.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
She wrote in a Vice column for the Crypt of Cthulhu.
Yeah, she did actually write that Dear Donna Death. And after she left, I don't know what happened to her. I guess she moved somewhere. I decided to continue writing it myself, and as Libidia Gilman, as she was a deep one with strategically placed tentacles and so forth, and she would give advice. Of course, the letters were all fake, as was the advice, and that was a pretty fun thing.
And you had some art in your magazine. There wasn't a lot, but I think you did some of the art. You did some drawings in it too.
Yeah, I did the first one. Showed Cthulhu coming out of his tomb. The second one, Cthulhu versus Godzilla. I think Jason Eckhart did the third one with the Yuggoth aliens. And he did the fourth one, which depicted the climax of Robert E. Howard's The Black Stone. And I did the fifth one, which I think was a Lovecraft and the Occult issue, where I made one of the Easter Island statues look like Lovecraft, which it kind of does anyway. And then on the sixth one, I think that was the August Derleth issue. And I think, Jason Eckhart did the round tower, or the tower in Newport. That was probably the basis for that Lovecraft fragment. But I had a blank covered copy that just got spat out by the machine, and drew a different cover on it showing Derleth with like seal flippers instead of hands, and that's a real rarity. Still have it up there somewhere.
You also had fake ads. It was like, you had the cool air conditioning and Innsmouth sardines.
Are you a deep one?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Yeah, that's great.
Was that a collaboration with the artist, or did the artist come with that stuff and give it to you, or how did those work?
I think I did the art for all of those, with Dr. Munoz with the cool air conditioner, and the tennis playing couple with Yago Sothoth wine cooler, and there must be some I didn't do, but I only remember that I did several.
And so what was it about Lovecraft that made you want to start doing this Crypt of Cthulhu?
Well, I had an earlier fascination with him when I was in junior high, and eventually I got out of all fantasy fiction for a few years, but then somehow was lured back into it and reread and recollected all the nifty stuff, a lot of it pulp reprints. And Lovecraft had always grabbed me. I loved the antique scholarly style, just the opposite of Robert E. Howard, who I loved also. Loved the Conan, King Kull, etc. But I really resonated with that, and with the evocative use of all these fake grimoires and unknown gods and secret cults. I found it so effective and stimulating that I made a few efforts at writing my own schlocky pastiches, and in later years tried to write serious stuff. But his fake religion and mythology and his style, I just found it hypnotically fascinating. And I came to share some of his religious and philosophical opinions in later years, but that wasn't really what attracted me to him. And so,
did it have any influence on you?
I'm sorry?
Did it have any influence on you?
Well, as a writer, yeah, because I've had, I guess, more than 40 stories published, of course, many of them in just very small press things. But I don't think I would have written any of that without the Lovecraft inspiration, just as I wouldn't have written the heroic fantasy stuff I write without having read Conan and Lynn Carter's Thongor and so on. I just was captivated by both, and by Edgar Rice Burroughs and Tolkien, Doc Savage, though I haven't really written in those genres yet. but that was a big influence on me. Doing the time I spent on all the fanzines and anthologies and so on was a major part of my life, and the writing. I love that, and I wouldn't have been doing it if I hadn't. I mean, I write a lot of academic stuff as well, but the fiction, I really love that, and I never would have done that if I hadn't have been hooked on these authors.
With all of Lovecraft's writings, just basically available, out there, not just his fiction, but his poetry, essays, his letters. Many of his weird tales have been turned into movies, from big, low to no budgets. And there's also games, audiobooks, toys, beer, slippers, and mustache oils, all named after him. Do you feel that we're living in a golden age to be a Lovecraft fan?
Yeah, though a lot of it seems to me profanation. Once I was talking to Richard Tierney, a great horror and sword and sorcery writer, recently passed away, sadly. This was back in the early 80s. He told me that he didn't care to go to Lovecraft conventions, and I think he never really went to one. And he said that once he had gone to some more local convention, and that though he loved Lovecraft, he somehow felt that being in the midst of a legion of people who shared the interest kind of spoiled it, that it was no longer his private preserve, his own treasured thing, that now it was every Tom, Dick, and Harry, every idiot nut was interested in this. And that it just seemed like it kind of ruined the mystery of it. And I find it hard to articulate, but I know what he means. And the plush Cthulhu toys and all that, I've got the Cthulhu right up there on the bookcase, the plush one, and a couple of plastic ones around here too. And I get a kick out of a bunch of it, but more and more, I really want to just stick to the fiction. I've sort of gotten sick of everything else. Like, I'm in no rush to go see a new Lovecraft related movie. I did kind of like the Color Out of Space. I thought that was a pretty loose adaptation, but nothing wrong with that. But insofar as I watch them, every year I have a schedule of monster and horror movies for October, and the ones I watch of Lovecraft's are Die Monster Die, The Dunwich Horror, and The Haunted Palace. I love them all. I like them better every time I see them, even though all the criticisms of them are justified. But I don't really need even that. It's like going back to the text is really the most fun thing.
Yeah, I can understand how, Lovecraft feels like a secret club. You have when you find somebody who knows it's you're also another member of the secret club. When everybody knows about the secret club, it's no longer a secret club anymore.
Yeah. I also think of something John Calvin said when he was criticizing the veneration of saints in the Catholic Church. He said that the pious Catholics are praying to the saints and all this, and that he said that he thought the average Catholic would be surprised to learn he could pray just to Jesus, and that Jesus is sort of lost in the crowd and becomes no more than a minor saintlet, I think he said. Well, there's a point to that. You got too darn many Christs. Once you think you want more of a good thing, you get too much of a good thing. And I think, which reminds me of a great theological joke. This old lady goes into a Catholic church. She's the only one in there, and she starts praying the rosary and to the Virgin Mary, and suddenly the ceiling vanishes and she sees Jesus sitting on the heavenly throne. And he says, my daughter, your prayer has been heard. What may I do for you? And the old lady says, hey, shut up, I'm talking to your mother. That's sort of the idea. And I think Lovecraft gets lost in the shuffle in the same way. Oh, yeah, he's a mythos writer. Yeah, he's really the mythos writers. Even when the others are good, they're a lot of fun to read, but let's not reduce Lovecraft to their level. Though today we do have a good crop of people that are genuinely inspired by Lovecraft, but are not just imitators and really go off in their own direction. We've waited a long time for that.
Who are some of them?
Laird Barron, though I think he may have left the Lovecraft fold in recent times. Joe Pulver was one, the good friend of mine, passed away. Cody Goodfellow, this guy he just breathes ideas, and he has the weirdest imagination and this dynamic, pulsing, bubbling over style. He can come up with something that is like a techno thriller, but authentically Lovecraftian. You're, how can he do this alchemy? But he does. And there are various other ones that, or need I say, Thomas Ligotti. He's just incredible, and the Lovecraft influence is strong, and yet Ligotti's completely original. It's amazing. Good stuff.
Now you've done some anthologies, for like different like themes and stuff like that, and different authors. And was that an offshoot of like doing Crypt of Cthulhu?
Yeah, I was approached first by Phil Raymond, who ran Fedogan and Bremer, which is kind of an attempt to fill the gap left by Arkham House. And he said, I hardly knew him at the time, but he said, you're dredging up all these scarce mythos and Lovecraftian items. Would you like to do an anthology of scarce items? And so I did Tales of the Lovecraft Mythos, and eventually 3 more of those with neglected or new writers. And then Chaosium approached me, and of course they're gamers, and many of their game fans were playing Call of Cthulhu, and they were attracted to all this weird stuff, but where did it come from? And so the publishers decided, well, let's do a bunch of collections of the relevant stories to give them the background of it, and those apparently went over real well, and I did loads of them, and now have they really were mismanaged for a long time, and so the publication of anything was spotty, and I got tired of waiting. So recently I put out the Exum cycle, stories related to Rats in the Walls, myself under my own imprint of Exum Priory, and I went to Hippocampus Press and Ramble House for the Yig cycle, and various other ones. And I may yet have another one from Chaosium, but I've continued to do those anthologies, and hope to do a couple of more anyway. But I'm also doing sword and sorcery ones too. I revived Lynn Carter's Flashing Swords. So
I was just going to ask about that. There was your introduction to Flashing Swords number 6 got some criticism from some of the authors that were in there.
Yeah, a bunch of cowards or wimps. I'm not sure which is which, because here these guys writing these bloody, cleave their skull stories, but suddenly I write something that is trying to stress how one thing to do to try to stem the tide of emasculating males in American society is to turn your young men on to reading Conan, John Carter of Mars, Doc Savage, where we have masculinity expressed in a strong way, but not particularly toxically. And to my amazement, half the writers in the book, once they got a look at the intro on Amazon, just as the book was actually becoming available, they just pulled their stories. No, I can't be associated with this. And so, what the hell? You're writing the same stuff, the stories. And they were either just cowards, because the publisher started getting threats from readers saying, if you publish this, we'll never buy another book from you. So this jerk crumbled also. And so all the better. I'll replace those stories with better ones and get a different publisher, which I did. And the second issue is soon to be in the works. But that really got me vilified all over the place by people that apparently could not read. They read what I said and said, oh, you're a rape apologist, you're a racist, a transphobe. Can you read the English language? Where are you getting this? And so I was attacked on atheist sites. And on weird fiction sites and so on. The same thing had happened a couple of years before when I was the guest of honor at the Necronomicon and was given the Robert Bloch Award and was invited to give the keynote speech, which I did. And I talked about how Lovecraft accurately predicted what would happen with revolt against reason and Western civilization. And oh boy, they were up in arms that I must be an Islamophobe and all that. I had no idea. I hadn't heard of these idiot social justice warriors yet. And that was my introduction. So at the same event where I got the lifetime achievement for work in Lovecraft, I got excommunicated. They barred me from ever speaking again,
Wow.
Which is, I'm glad it happened because it is so hilarious. But I go through these cycles of universal revilement from politically correct wokesters.
So how do you keep going after that? You know.
Well, I've developed a pretty thick skin and I have nothing but disdain for these idiots, whether they're attacking me or other people. So I kind of think their movement is doomed and they'll eventually snap out of it. But I don't really care because if it means I go back to where tyranny was, where it's a small circle of people that I share Lovecraft with, that's fine with me. I don't care. So I'm doing my work, the same work I always did, both in religious studies and in weird fiction. It hasn't really changed me or what I do.
And you did some podcasts too. You did a like a podcast on Lovecraft and also your atheism, I guess you could say, your Bible geek.
Yeah. I also had another one called The Human Bible, but that I'm kind of going to let go, I think. It was a similar approach, but with the Bible Geek, I just answer questions people have about the Bible and biblical criticism. And I make it clear in every episode, I am the friend and champion of the Bible, not its opponent. I'm not like one of these atheist nuts that thinks the Bible is like Mein Kampf or something. So I'm right on the boundary there, as Tillich used to say. So I figure my listeners and I love the Bible, and virtually all of them are some kind of skeptics or ex-believers. But once it gets its hook into you, you get all the more fascinated with it. And so we explore that kind of stuff on the Bible Geek. The Lovecraft Geek, that's kind of run out of steam too. And the last two I've done were just reading a couple of Lovecraft stories that people asked me to read, but that's effectively kind of expired as well.
I came across your sermon archives, and there was one that caught my attention. It was action figure addiction.
Ha! Yeah.
And I noticed in your background, you do have an awful lot of action figures on your mantle.
That's nothing. That's just the tip of the iceberg. I'm definitely a nut and an obsessive collector and customizer.
Yeah. I see a lot of Superman. Do you like Superman, or is that just what you show off here?
He's my favorite, with Spider-Man a close second, I guess. But I really am a sucker for Superman and all the different varieties of his costume, or parallel world Superman. And I just love all of that stuff. I no longer really read new comics because they stink now, but I do prize a lot of older ones.
And
Can't afford them anyway.
we do like a Lovecraftian word.
I'm old enough to remember when you paid like 10 cents for a comic book, and it was like $5 for a comic book.
Yeah,
Oh, thanks.
the price has gone up quite a bit now.
Oh,
And
yeah.
usually for an episode, we do like a word of the month. And I thought I'd pick this one, blasphemy. Lovecraft had a very interesting definition, or his own definition for blasphemy. So what was that definition?
That was one of the very first articles I wrote. It was in the first issue of Crypt, Lovecraft's concept of blasphemy. I said, well, the guy did not have conventional religious beliefs. So why did he use that word, and what did he use it for? Well, conventionally, blasphemy implies something shockingly offensive said about God or religion, sort of the same thing as sacrilege. And Lovecraft doesn't mean that, but he is saying the same kind of shocking revelation that is horrifying is what is revealed in his stories about the ordinary understanding of the universe and our place in it. That we think we're so great that the world revolves around us, so we're the pinnacle of creation, the most intelligent. And he says, suppose we were to find out that no, we're no more permanent and no more significant than the trilobite or the pterodactyl. One day we'll be gone simply at because of the inexorable laws of nature. No one will remember us. Will be forgotten in eternity. So that actually can make you an existentialist, which he kind of was. He said there really isn't any meaning in life, but there's a lot of fascination and beauty in it. It's well worth sticking around for, which is sort of existentialism. You create the meaning in your life. But blasphemy would be this shocking revelation that the anthropocentrism of human thought is a pathetic joke. So the guy that discovers about Cthulhu and the old ones and the call of Cthulhu, he says, I wish I'd never discovered this. The beauty of a spring day is overshadowed and made a mockery by what I know. And well, that's kind of what he meant, something that makes nonsense of our most cherished illusions.
God love Lovecraft. Such an optimist he was, wasn't he?
Well, I better get going. I gotta do some other stuff here. But
yeah, but that was my last question. Thank you very much for joining us and all that. The stars are no longer right. We must cease all discussion until they line again.
It's a pleasure and an honor.
30
Great,
plus
let's do it
Lovecraft
again.
is sponsored by the Lovecraft Theme Park. Try the Deep Ones Underwater Roller Coaster. The podcast is created in association with LovecraftPod.com, the Logan Speculative Fiction Group, Logan County Public Library, and the Great Old Ones. Special thanks to Katie Tyson for being the Marie Anna Mozart of podcast editing, and Joshua Dukes for the Georgism. Until we meet again, may you avoid the fish sticks of Princess Cthulhu.